get started. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we'll learn more about the women in the LexSeeHer monument, the historical women who inspired it, and the process of bringing it to town. My name is Kamala, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. We'd also like to thank LexSeeHer for their partnership on this program and the LexSeeHer panels that are currently behind our screen. We invite you later after the program to appreciate the work that went into producing these panels. We will have time for questions at the end of the program. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator. Jessie Steigerwald founded LexSeeHer in March 2020 and joyfully serves as the organization's president. Among Jessie's activities for LexSeeHer, she leads the research team and coordinates the annual 1769 spinning protest tableau. She has organized the 2024 Unveiling Ceremony, the HERstory project, and coordinated first look events with the running throughout Lexington's celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington. Jessie, welcome. I'm going to pass the mic to you to host and introduce our guests.
I'm getting my tech tips here. How's that? Good? Really okay? Great. So as you heard with Helen, my slides were also recently updated so that I could include the monument, because here it is. I will be sharing tonight with Meredith Bergmann, so let's all welcome her with a big Lexington round of applause. And I'm going to share a bit, she'll share a bit, and we will have time for questions and conversation. In many ways, last week's unveiling ceremony was like the end of a very long 4-year process, but it was also absolutely the beginning for our community to become essentially a magnet for really cool people. I want to just thank Alice, who shared this scarf with our team. I will be passing it around, but I get to wear it first. Because literally, I also met, and I'm sorry, Jay. I met Jay today. Literally, we have created what's called a third place. You have your home, maybe you have a place where you work outside the home, or maybe your home is your workplace. And there's this concept of a third place, someplace else where you might go and that you experience your life. That is what has happened here. It's a monument, but it's also a gathering space. I want to also just note that here tonight are many people who've made this possible. Betty Gow is here, who was the first co-chair. Valerie Overton was part of our first steering committee. Alyssa Lausen has served a lot of roles called go to Zoom during COVID and keep people moving forward. Not to mention the spinning tableau. Cheryl Moreau is here, who was there multiple years for our August reenactment of the 1769 spinning tableau, to which I hope you will all come this August 31st, and I'll talk about that. Beth Sager's here, one of our very, very dedicated business sponsors, who we really appreciate very much. And Corin is here, and Helen, who have made the space here at the library a third place for all of us, but also a really special place for LexSeeHer to come and share our excitement about this project. Also, one more person, Michelle Tran is over there behind the video camera. Hello, Michelle. A lot of Zooms. Oh, and Martha Wood is here. I can't see you, Martha. Not only from the first day in the steering committee in March 2020, but have remained steadfast the entire slog. We went to a sprint team and then a slog team. No offense, Meredith. But we made it. So I'm going to show you some pictures that are fresh because the monument's new. I will say the dates now and at the end so you don't forget. Saturday, we'll be at the monument for Discovery Day. And August 31st is our spinning tableau, to which we hope you'll all come. And then during the summer, we will have some evenings at the monument where we will be doing sewing, and I'll tell you more about that later. This photograph is really to emphasize that this is a group project. Don't try this at home unless you're ready to work with a team and collaborate. And we've said it over and over. What I notice in the media is it's much easier for a journalist to tell a hero story. Like, Meredith is the hero, Jessie's the hero, one person did this. And in reality, what's been so beautiful for our team is that Meredith is a brilliant collaborator. Not only did she have this amazing idea about many women, again, not a hero story, but a story about community, intergenerational relationships, taking 70 years in order to achieve the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. But here in Lexington, it took a lot of time to go through many different town committees to share our idea and get permission. This is a public monument. It now belongs to all of us. The state contributed. I will emphasize here that the town of Lexington did not contribute financially. I've heard through the Lexington, it's not a rumor mill, it's a direct pipeline of information we all share, that there was concern from a resident that the town was spending money on a monument when there's a big high school project. But the town did not spend money on the monument. We were told up front to do it privately, which we've done, thanks to many of you, and I just want that to be clear. This is my belated thank you for last week. These are the women who were behind all the events. If you saw them on Lex Media, thank you Lex Media for live streaming them. This is just most of the team that started in January getting these events together. We felt like the monument was so significant, not only for the idea that Meredith brought forward and for the women in the monument who deserve recognition a long time ago, but also it's the most recent monument. There hasn't been a new monument since the Prince Estabrook Monument. So we wanted to have a lot of opportunities for people to be welcoming to the monument and to learn its story. We're also thanking the Girl Scouts. They were there beginning March 8th, 2020. The Girl Scouts helped do the visibility banners. I'll show you pictures of those. But we certainly relied on them during the pandemic to help us find a creative way to let 32,000 people know that we had this idea of making a new monument. People were cooped up. Obviously, we had the COVID shutdown. So Girl Scouts kept persisting right alongside with us. This is Peter Kelly, retired select board member. And he and his wife Beverly were huge supporters. If you're in this room and you bumped into us even on the sidewalk, Paul, I see you, and we're encouraging in the last 4 years, I see you too there, Suzanne, that made a big difference, because again, in the pandemic, we were all working on Zoom, and you have this idea that your friends in your bubble all think is a great idea, but does the town like this idea? Will it actually materialize? It took a lot of encouragement. These are members of our research team. This is Meg and Anne and Alexandra. A research team met Monday nights for most of the 4 years, looking not only at, in the beginning, just women in Lexington, but also specific women that were nominated by community members. So somebody said, I think this woman is worthy of recognition, and maybe none of us knew anything about the woman. Like many of the women in the monument, if you go look on Wikipedia right now, you're not going to find a lot of information. I'm also still recruiting because we need volunteers to help us transfer what we've learned, which is in the book, which Betty can hold up right now. If you crane your neck around, you'll see it. The book is a first try at helping get the important information about these women out to the community, but we also would love to have the Wikipedia pages there, and we should write them ourselves because they should be written respectfully. We're super excited to have made friends with different high school students and middle school students. This is the Parity Bits. They are a robotics team at the high school that is all women, and they actually reached out to us. This again goes to that idea of, going to the monument, you're likely to bump into someone you want to have a conversation with. It helped, it turned out, for people to think, oh, I'm caring about women or girls. Where can I go in Lexington? We have a lot of affinity groups, but we didn't recently have kind of a gender-focused group focused on women or girls. A student here, Maya Salafidi, who just graduated from the high school, had a great idea, reached out to Cheryl. She wanted to write a song about the monument and its effort and the women, so she premiered that at our events. Again, it's that, how do we find each other? And we'll talk about that more with our historic women. If anyone saw the live or recording, this is Billy Engel and this is Tara Gibson, two of the descendants of women commemorated in the monument. Billy's enthusiasm really captured the highs of this project when you have a discovery and you find other people who also want to tell these stories. Tara, Celeste Freeman, one of our vice presidents, found Tara as a descendant of Kate Chester on Ancestry.com. And we met on a Zoom where, if you meet someone in the internet, you're not sure about each other, and maybe you have your screens off. And Celeste and I said, all right, we're going to put our screens on. And Tara started with her screen off. and then eventually turned it on, and she had a bag, a Ziploc bag full of documents from her family from the 1700s and 1800s. And then we really clicked. She drove up in a snowstorm 2 days later. We met at Wales Copy, and she shared with us these letters. Her 8th generation grandmother, Kate Chester, was, her mom was enslaved. She was taken from her mom from Boston, and she was taken by a man named Phineas Taylor out to Boxborough. Somehow, she negotiated her freedom and a piece of land from Mr. Taylor. She came to Lexington then as a free woman. She married Prince Chester. They had 2 girls here right around the time of the battle. We know from Reverend Jonas Clark that she spun, as in spinning, which we'll talk about. She spun and her husband participated, and that was noted in his account books. So she is one of the revolutionary mothers who was here, literally a mother at the time of the revolution with 2 children. She eventually moved her family back to Boxborough. We don't know why, but her family survives to this day. So here's Tara with this bag of unbelievable documents, deeds, photographs from the 1800s, and that she shared with us, and they are now actually being archived at Cary Library. They're all being digitized for further research. So again, how do you kind of build this network of information and rebuilding the stories? Mary Keenan, many of you know, and there's her sister Anne, with a dear friend Sue, who is now portraying Peggy Kimball, Lexington pilot, also commemorated in the monument. Peggy Kimball was a poet, she was an actor, and she helped found what is now LexArt, or Lexington Arts and Crafts Society. She was a pilot who had the same level of licensing as Amelia Earhart. When Sue marched in Patriots Day, a lot of people said, Amelia Earhart's from Lexington. Like, she's not from Lexington, but she had such great skill, she was allowed to fly without instruments, and that's considered a really difficult thing to do. This is Sal Jones. Sal's wife, Sylvia, is also in the monument, one of the more recent women. This is Freddie Kay. I did not get to give her a shout out, so I'm doing it now. She's leading the effort to have a museum about women's history in Massachusetts. Definitely a project that we want to share and support. And Sal was there along with her son, Evan. Now I'm going to sort of switch into other slides. One of the things that was important to us was working with a woman named Elizabeth Solomon, who's an elder in the Massachusetts Tribal Council. So this space has a 12,000 plus year history of women and girls who are indigenous. And one of the first things she said to us is, she said, I love the monument. It's great. It's from a colonizer perspective, and that's okay. You're talking about the town history from 1713 forward, but there is this other history. And so Celeste and I said, what do you think? What do you advise we can do? And she said, you can help carry forward the message that we're here. We're here today. Indigenous people are here right now. And Meredith supported this whole conversation, and one of the models in the work is an Indigenous young woman today, which helps us really think about what can be hidden, but we can celebrate. That's Meredith at work, but she'll do that part. A few thousand hours she'll tell you about. That's a quick picture of what it looked like before, and as you know now, if you've seen it, there are different women on each side of this work. When we put out our call to artists, we were thinking about like 3 women, which we thought was bold. We knew if we could only tell one story, we wanted it to be Margaret Tulip's story. We wanted to also tell Anna Harrington's story if possible, and we thought Caroline Wellington would be great because she brings the story from the battle time into the 1800s. Meredith will talk about this as well, but it really helped us that she did a sculpture rehearsal and gave us a sense of what was to be. But we did learn in the government approval process that many of us do not know how sculptures are built. So one person on a committee was very disappointed because she saw the foam core mock-up and she said, Meredith, I've seen your work for other towns. It's really beautiful. Like you use bronze and metal and detail, and this is what we get. And Meredith very politely explained, this is literally foam core and duct tape. It's just a 3-dimensional sketch that gives you a sense of the size. And obviously the real work takes thousands of hours. So I'm gonna just tell you about 3 of the women right now. Margaret Tulip, I don't think Leslie made it. Michelle, is she coming? Okay, so I'm gonna do my best. Leslie Masson has spent 4 years researching this woman's life. Margaret Tulip was born in Charlestown. Her mother was enslaved. When she was 3 weeks old, she was taken from her mother. When she was 5 months old, she was traded for a colt, a small horse. She was then sold or otherwise traded and became the property of the Green family. The Green family moved to Lexington, and Esther Green, the daughter, gets engaged to marry Amos Muzzy. So the Muzzy property, Muzzies were a first family here, or an early family. The Muzzy property was, if you're looking at Buckman Tavern and you're looking to the right, kind of where the Emery Park area is, the Muzzies had a big piece of property there. So Amos Muzzy marries Esther. At this time, if you're married as a woman, you no longer exist as a separate entity in the eyes of the law. You have no worth in that way. So basically, Amos is then the enslaver of Margaret. We don't know what happened. She was supposed to be free at age 22, and we don't know. There's not enough primary source evidence of what happened. She may have been living as a free person. We know she got married to Robin Tulip. We know they had children. We know she later had grandchildren here. And Leslie knows a lot more, which she's working on in a book, which will be really exciting to read. But eventually, Amos dies, and his son William claims Margaret as his property. Somehow, Margaret decides and gets the resources to take him to court. So she sues for her freedom, and she wins through the courts. Because there was a court case, there's a lot of depositions and materials, and that allows Leslie to go and learn not just about Margaret, but about other women at the time period, because we don't have a lot of information about women's lives. When it's determined she's free in a jury vote, when you look at the monument, you see here there's a scroll, and Meredith has put the actual words, which were a free woman and not a slave, right there. That jury vote was decided by one vote. If one person had decided differently, her trajectory and her family's would have been very different. Amelia Worthy was the model. We wanted to support Meredith in finding models who were real people that she could work with. And Meredith was very far along when Leslie located actual descendants of Margaret Tulip. So they came up, and I'll let Meredith tell you that part of the story. On the other side is Anna Harrington. Anna Harrington held a protest at her home. If you picture First Parish Church, to the right there's a house and then an empty plot of land. That is where Anna Harrington had 45, quote, young ladies at her home. They brought their spinning wheels out, and I told you before, and here's where I'm telling you. On August 31st of 1769, this event took place. It was a massive political protest at a time when women couldn't vote, they couldn't run for office, and many men's protests had been declared illegal. Like, at some point they said town governments couldn't even meet, so we know the men, the selectmen, met in the tavern in illegal meetings. The women, though, there wasn't a ban against women protesting because no one even thought they would. So they would take their spinning wheels outside, and in a charming twist of fate, the man in town who was the wheelwright, where you would take your grandmother's spinning wheel out to get repaired, was Captain John Parker, as in the Minuteman statue. So we felt it was very lovely to have the Minuteman right across from this statue because, of course, women and men at the time knew each other. They were a community. And if you picture 45 women out on a front lawn, it's a significant part of the population. This was her home. The town had the opportunity to purchase it, but they did not purchase it. It is now the First Parish Church are the stewards of it. We know this happened because there's a newspaper article about it. And now we reenact this each year with a growing number of partners. So Cheryl from Lex Art has brought Lex Art into it. The Girl Scouts participate. Historical Society had the idea in the first place. They did it on the actual 250th anniversary of 1769. And then we hope you will consider signing up. I'm just going to tell you like a minute and a half worth more. Up in the top left corner, if you're facing Buckman Tavern, you see Abigail Harrington holding a child. And it's the morning of April 19, 1775. She wakens her son, her teenage son, Jonathan, and says, "Jonathan, the regulars are out, and something must be done." He takes his fife and he runs to the green. He serves that day, and then he ends up being the longest surviving man who served on the green. So you know how we feel about anniversaries. They did then too. So he's called over and over and over to tell his story, and he always tells it as I did with his mom at the start of the story, which we shared with the select board and other committees that women were important in the narrative for a long, long time. It's just that the threads were lost. We're just putting back what was already there, And we know this to be true because in the Minuteman, there are tellings of his story and even his descendants coming back and telling the same story. So Meredith has put those words back in here on the monument. This is Caroline Wellington. She had 3 men in her family who served on the Green. And we talked about it being a small community of like 1,000 people. Everybody here knew Jonathan Harrington's story. They probably had to sit through it a bunch of times, right? And so when, in 1850, Caroline's mother put out a petition to the state legislature asking for women to have the right to vote, where they were unsuccessful, Caroline persisted with her family. In 1877, she and her sister made this banner, and they put those revolutionary words, "Something must be done," on the banner. The banner was not successful in 1877, so in 1912, she hands it off to a younger woman, Vera Lane, who takes it to Washington, D.C. in the first Women's March in Washington. And they use this "something must be done" because it's rhetoric, it's intellectual rhetoric, it's political strategy to say the same themes about what everyone embraces, becoming a new country, democracy, liberty, freedom, the same theme, no taxation without representation. It's the same argument these women are making. And like we did today, or like we might do at the monument, these women are meeting and organizing in their version of a third place. So I'm going to pause there and have Meredith come up. Meredith will share more about the making of the monument, and then we can take questions. Yeah, I'm going to shift. Okay. Pay no attention to this part. I know, right?
Do
you want to run it up your shirt?
No, I'm just going to clip it right.
You put this.
How's it go? It goes like this.
That's for Lexington.
Yep.
We have to use this first.
Yeah. I'll just see if I can clip it on without it. There we go. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sir?
Oh, great. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. Hi. Can you hear me okay? How's that? All right. Resonance. Hello, and thank you for coming. I applied for this commission based on photographs like this, and I went to visit the site, which is always how I begin. So I'm going to lead you through the thinking behind the monument, behind my design, and then some of the physical production of it, the casting, etc. Just for starters, how many of you are familiar with art history or travel to go to museums and know about medieval art or anything like that? Okay, thank you. Because I spend a great deal of time reading, traveling when we can, and looking at art from all ages. And I have a kind of slide file in my head. So when I go to a place, I think immediately of many, many images. They just kind of arise, and that's kind of how I get ideas. So I saw the lawn in front of the visitor center, and it had a kind of an architectural axis, a kind of feeling that something wanted to be there that was more than just a statue. But it wasn't until I actually went into the visitor center and asked about anything pertaining to colonial women or children, because I was still thinking statues. I was thinking, well, maybe there could be a statue holding a smaller figure, like a doll or something. Maybe they could. So I said, do you have any colonial dolls? Do you have any biographies?
Louder.
Okay.
Closer.
Yep. And they said, no. There is a small biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg down there in the corner. And I said, okay, where in town can I find something like that? I mean, Lexington is full of tourists. No one in the visitor center knew. And then I walked next door to Buckman Tavern, entered through the gift store where they had tons of colonial crafts, dolls, costumes, biographies of women, biographies of children, just everything you could possibly want to kind of begin researching the history of Lexington. And upstairs, this marvelous, really comprehensive exhibition called Bold Women of Lexington that began in colonial times and came up to the present. And you'll see that some of these images appear in the monument. Anna Harrington spinning, and one of the women's marches. But I thought that perhaps this celebration of women's achievement deserved joy and accomplishment and celebration and maybe even a hint of triumph. So I was thinking of triumphal arches, which were erected in ancient times, not just for a military victory, but for the installation of an aqueduct bringing fresh water to a city. They put up a triumphal arch because it was such an accomplishment. So I wanted to channel some of that joyfulness. This is a marvelous little piece by Donatello with cutout figures, and it is bas-relief, B-A-S-relief. It's the French sculptural term from the 19th century when all sculptural terms were French, because that's where sculptors went to learn sculpture. Bas-relief with cutouts around the figures, which is very rare. Usually you see bas-relief on bronze doors with a background, or on plaques with a background. But I thought how wonderful it would be if this triumphal structure had an opportunity to see right through it, to see the town through it. One of my favorite things is this playground on Fifth Avenue, just north of the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. These are the Osborne Gates. They were put up in 1952, and they're by Paul Manship, who had a house and studio up on Cape Ann, which I urge you to visit if you're ever curious. He is famous for the Prometheus statue that's up over the skating rink in Rockefeller Center, a beautiful gilded figure. But he loved ancient Greek art, medieval art, Asian art, and he illustrated Aesop's fables in these gates. But these are full round, they're not bas-relief, they're sculpted animals that were welded into a framework of bas-relief plants and plaques with words on them. And I actually went up to Cape Ann and read his correspondence with his Italian foundry and to learn how they were manufactured, because this is very tricky. Here's one of the gates. They're usually set open, so you can't really see them unless you go and look. And they have animals on top. Down at the bottom, there's some frogs, and the country mouse and the city mouse are in the bottom left-hand corner. So these were inspiring. Then I began to think about how do you organize a whole lot of stories? And I started thinking about murals, and specifically murals from the Depression, from the WPA, Works Progress Administration, that actually paid artists to paint. This is by Thomas Hart Benton, who also studied Baroque art and Renaissance art, and his painting style is kind of overheated. But the thing that interested me about this, and I used to take classes at the New School in New York City where these were on the walls covered by heavy drapes, and I had a terribly boring psychology professor, so I would peek behind the drapes during class. Look at these weird architectural abstract moldings going through there. He just made them up, and they match the moldings around the mural, but they serve no purpose. They're just there to organize the material. And I thought, what shape can I find to organize? If I want to include all these bold women of Lexington, how do I organize them and show a kind of sweep of history? I was already thinking in terms of an oval motion. Well, how about a powder horn shape? And you see this twice for the Minuteman and for the battle. And I was thinking, well, yes, the men were there with the muskets, but maybe the women loaded the powder horns. Maybe they even helped make the gunpowder. And I drew, you can see the horn shape here. It starts up in the top inner corner and sweeps down, and then there's a kind of a diagonal line that marks the mouth of the horn. But it's just a device for organizing so that the women come down and out and towards what I conceived of as a central space where a visitor could stand and touch the hands of the women on either side and kind of complete the circuit, almost like electricity. So this is a little model. It's about 12 inches. Yeah, it's 1 inch equals 1 foot. Made with a kind of sculptural putty and painted to look like bronze. And this was what I submitted as part of the proposal to the committee. So this was, you'll see in the bottom right corner, there's a very rough sketch of how the thing actually now looks with the benches and the circle representing a spinning wheel. Anyway. And this is the sculpture rehearsal. You'll see this is flat, painted, just wall paint, brown, which did confuse people, but it was a wonderful way to determine if this was the right scale, if this was the right size. And we had a parachute representing the pavement to see if that needed to be bigger. It's almost like, does it want to be bigger or does it want to be smaller? That's what you are determining. So these sculpture rehearsal mock-ups are very important, although they are often misinterpreted. Then I got to work on the arch. You'll see the arch here is a half circle, not the actual architectural arch, which is a lower curve, and I was really trying to do half a spinning wheel, but I started playing with all these different ways to bridge the two panels, and I finally ended up with this one, where I could take a tulip from Margaret Tulip's symbolism and the sunflower from which is traditionally the flower of the suffrage movement, and trade sides so that everything is even more united. Whoops. Oh, here we go. This is, I love Asian art, and this is a pierced bas-relief. This is actually in the Beijing restaurant down the street, and I just noticed it when we were there. But there is a kind of surreal quality and a lightness of touch in this kind of art, where there's some ground down at the bottom out of which the plants are growing, and then there's these beautiful floating letters that are just smushed onto the plants. And I used some of that in the rendering of the smoke from the tea burning fire. That was another protest. I assume you all know about the tea burning, so I won't go into that. Okay, so some of the things that I love, I found a way to put into the monument. This is an ancient Greek bas-relief of a dancing Maenad, a woman who has drunk too much and is celebrating the wild spirit of Bacchus. And I love her dancing skirt. So I tried to give a little of that to the motion of these figures. Mary Elizabeth Bibb in her academic robes, even Caroline Wellington in her 1912 long tweed skirt. This is the figure of Kate Chester with her mother, and this is back to back with Abigail Harrington calling out to her son Jonathan. Another design idea I had was to use the two upper corners of the gate almost as if in a medieval book of hours, where you have daytime and nighttime, or on a grandfather clock where you have phases of the moon, but in this case to have events of the day in one corner and events of the night in the other. So the night is very peaceful, there's a crescent moon, and there's a mother working while her child sleeps on her shoulder. On one side it's Janet Haas, the music teacher, on another it's two different female architects from town. But the daytime events are more frantic. Abigail Harrington is upset. You know, this is the beginning of the American Revolution. She goes to wake her teenage son, who was probably hard to wake because he was 17 years old. And that gave me the opportunity to put this very distraught mother on the other side. And one of the things that I looked at was imagery like this. This is a 12th century, 13th century? 1200s, I'm sorry, fresco by Giotto. I think it's from Assisi, where he paints the massacre of the innocents. So this is children being wrenched away from their mothers and killed. On a happier note, the banderole or the scroll is, you see this a lot in art, a way of displaying something, announcing something. The angel of the Annunciation is often speaking, sometimes carrying a scroll, and here's a heavenly messenger. But you also see it in sculpture. This is from one of the French cathedrals. And so for Margaret Tulip, with her legal documents, I didn't want to just have her holding a sheaf of papers to show you. So I gave her the long scroll. This is the clay model, by the way, because I've only just gotten to photograph the monument. I've been a little too busy. So, and this writing which you see in the bronze, is actually based on the actual document. We tried to copy the way it looked. It says, Margaret Tulip is a free woman and not a slave. Here's another important banner. This is the one Jessie was speaking about. Lexington, something must be done. And this is where the title of the piece comes from. Something is being done. And I wanted that to kind of resonate backwards and forwards in time, because obviously something is being done here in 1887, in 1780, in 1775, and now, and hopefully on into the future. This is a little tiny painting from a medieval prayer book of some kind of lord and lady and someone petitioning them, and the Lord is speaking, and it creates this huge banner that comes down and actually intersects where the petitioning man is speaking, but you'll notice the woman doesn't get to say anything. But I wanted, when I made the suffrage banner, the Something Must Be Done banner, I knew I couldn't make it solid, because that would darken, it would block out too much of the view through. So I just made the sign part, and that means that the young woman on the other side can be holding a picket sign. But the ribbons come down, and Caroline Wellington's sash, her sash, which was probably purple, white, and yellow, divides into these 3 ribbons, and I think of those as kind of continuing the message, like these ribbons of speech. Okay, so how is this made? From those drawings, I made full-size drawings, transferred them to plywood, and this is my stalwart assistant, Patrick Piggott, who's a marvelous sculptor in his own right, who came 3 days a week for 9 months and worked with me. And he cut this out by hand and then built it into a framework. And we painted it green, the color of the clay, and then started adding insulating foam to just add a very lightweight layer where we knew it would be thickest. So the monument is very thick at the bottom. Those women down at the bottom are hollow, but up at the top, it's only 3/4 of an inch thick, and they're solid bronze. So then comes clay, and here I am with drawings stuck to the clay with more clay, just beginning to rough out the volumes of these figures. And we made the faces removable so that I could bring them down and work on them at a table and see them up close without having to stand all the time. So here you see half of the monument really in the middle of sculpting. Things, I don't know if you can see, the rabbit looks pretty lumpy. Facial features, eyes, things like that come last. On the left, it's just getting started. And of course, this is only one side. So this is why it took months to sculpt. There's Patrick up on a scaffolding, and I'm working on the rabbit's ears. And then this was Senator Cindy Friedman paying a visit to see the finished clay model. And again, this is one side. These frames are on wheels, so we could separate the 3 pieces, take the arch off, and flip around the pieces, and then put the arch back on. And here is board member Celeste Freeman. There was an approvals process with LexSeeHer coming to see the model before it went to the bronze foundry. And it was lifted onto a truck. They did not want us to crate it or wrap it. It was a very hot day. The clay is oil-based clay. I was just kind of biting my nails, but we did reinforce the framework with 2x4s. And this marvelous rigging company that later installed the monument got it onto a truck, took it away from my barn studio, onto the highway, and to the foundry in Amesbury. And here's the co-owner of the foundry, Carolyn, on the left. Carolyn, and I don't remember his name right now. They are painting on liquid rubber, and they have subdivided the sculpture with these little cross pieces into 105 separate sections, which I had not imagined, and I had to just trust that they would be able to rejoin all the pieces when it was cast in bronze. So here's Carolyn Kendall holding a mold, and this is, looks like Julia Robbins But she's inside out. This is the mold into which a wax positive will be made. And then here are the wax positives. At the bottom is Mary Elizabeth Bibb with her diploma, and above her is the head of Caroline Wellington with part of her sign. So these wax pieces are invested in fireproof molds. The wax is melted out, and into that void, which represents where the bronze will be, they pour the bronze. So these are various small pieces of the sculpture. And this is a marvelous foundry. Half of the employees are women, and they do beautiful work. So here you can see Caroline Wellington's head with her sign, and the torso of the aviator, you know, because she's holding goggles at the upper left, and some other miscellaneous pieces. Meanwhile, the plaza was built. A lot of excavation, a lot of structural engineering, because the monument is permanent. It is anchored deep into concrete vaults that are down in the ground with foundation, gravel, and then lighter gravel, and then this concrete slab that is underneath all the granite. It's really a building. And pretty much any monument that is erected nowadays has this kind of structure underneath it, which required a structural engineer. And Inga Daniels, who is our landscape architect, who addressed issues like how to make sure that the thing drains, that water will run off it without your noticing any kind of slope and go to the drain that was pre-existing, and how the ground should be graded back up to the street behind it, and many, many other wonderful details. Okay, so here are bronze sections that have just been welded together, the two halves of Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin, astronomer and astrophysicist, and she's holding a little telescope. This is Kristen, who is one of the chief metal workers, and she's actually working on the squirrel, although you can't tell it's a squirrel because it's so discolored from all the welding, that many pieces. However, here is raw bronze. It does not have a patina on it, but it's all been welded and then wire brushed and sandblasted. I think it's been sandblasted. Anyway, it's clean. So this is the arch. And then they began to assemble the monument in this frame. It's up in the air because it has legs of stainless steel that go down into these vaults and anchor it. So they could never quite get it at floor level, but that was kind of fun. And I went in with a Sharpie and marked everything that you would catch your finger on, every nub, or in this case, the apple that overlaps the hills of Lexington at the bottom was not sufficiently outlined. And so with a little tool, they can go in and carve down some of the bronze. So I marked everything like that over several visits. And here are Kristen and I think that's TJ working on assembling it and finishing the metal. And here is one piece of it having been patinaed, waiting to go on the truck. Okay, and a close-up of the patinaed metal in the foundry. It will look different at different times of day. Here it is on the truck. They're just lifting one panel up in the air. One panel has been installed. It slid right perfectly into the sockets. This is why you need not only a structural engineer, but a foundry owner who will come 2 or 3 times to measure over and over to make absolutely sure that those stainless steel legs would just slide right in. And they did. So these guys are happy. They're just sliding it into place. And then the arch goes on. And then this is the night before the unveiling. This is the lighting designer, Julie Rose, with her daughter. And we're adjusting the angle of the lighting. I couldn't resist getting the steeple in the background. And because I was too busy during the unveiling to take photos, this is my photo of the finished monument. So that's it. Okay. So now, if you have questions, we can pass this back and forth. Did you show off these books? Yes.
In the beginning, when you were talking about the, I can speak up, I don't know. in the beginning when you were discussing no books or biographies or things in the visitor center about women and women's lives, and then there was the incomprehensible, and then you saw this other exhibit. Where was that?
It was next door,
Next door.
in the Buckman Tavern.
And the people,
And I was just wandering around cluelessly, so I went into the visitor center
and
first.
the people in the visitor center didn't know about it?
Not at that time. I
That's
think things are,
interesting.
yeah.
So Stacy Frazier was the curator of an exhibit. It was timed for 2020, which was the U.S. suffrage centennial. So she and her team, a great team of people, had been working for like a year on getting ready for that event. Meanwhile, a group of us friends were doing a reenactment of Caroline Wellington's banner trip down to Washington for the suffrage centennial. So I think, not all the dots were connected.
I see.
I think now people are trying much harder. So like I will put in a plug for our stuff. So like the book now will be, it's at Whale Copy and it's at Maxim Books and the Visitor Center and Buckman Tavern. And I think that kind of connection.
And necklaces.
Oh yeah, we're gonna,
And
this
earrings.
is now an ad. Lex Media viewers, here's your ad from your sponsor. Because we're always raising money, Martha Wood, Vice President of Development, would tell me we're always raising money, which we are. We want to have a permanent sign there that gives people more information when they visit. So Meredith pulled out this beautiful bird that she and I are both wearing on our necklace. You talk about the bird, I'll talk
Yeah,
about Ada.
it also comes as earrings.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
You tell about the bird design, I'll tell it.
Okay, there were more women than I could fit in the monument. So Ada Govan is represented by a rose-breasted grosbeak wearing a bird band. And she has a wonderful story which Jessie will tell you.
We're a team. This is a book called Wings at My Window. And Ada Govan wrote this book, and someone, I don't know who on Facebook, said something about last night. They cast a gauntlet down for me. They said, Ada Govan didn't really shape history, so let me see if I can persuade you. Ada Govan lived here in Lexington, and she had a son, and then she had 2 daughters who died. She was extremely grief-struck, as one would certainly be. She was essentially semi-paralyzed with grief. And one day a little chickadee came to her window and it was in distress. And she kind of describes in this book dragging herself over to try to help this little bird. What happens the rest of her life is all different because of this bird. She gets very interested watching the wings at her window, the birds who are coming by. The more she puts bird food out, the more different birds come and she starts studying them. She eventually has another child, David, and together they enter the world of ornithology and bird watching, and it captivates her. She gets licensed, which was not easy, and very few women had a license to band birds. When Meredith heard this, we were standing there in the studio. I bet Michelle remembers that day. Meredith said, you said they have bands? And she went and got a piece of clay, and then she put it on the bird right in front of us. Like,
Yep.
wow, okay.
Yeah.
So she's banding them, which means she can register each bird, and then her descendant, Billy, was here last week and told me so much more about Ada, like the family side. But she and her son David counted, I think he said over 500 different returns of birds who were here, got banded, left, came back. This data went into professionally trained ornithologists understanding migratory patterns. This is not an insignificant contribution. This is a very important contribution. The longer we live, the more we know how interconnected we all are. And Meredith's work, including so many animals and people together with plants, is a real visual representation.
Also she began writing about birds and had a column in the Boston Globe, and then during the Depression supported the family with her writing. So this is a breaking out of silence as well, and an economic affirmation of her worth. And there's a sanctuary named after her here in town.
There's literally a bird sanctuary. And think again about this like third place idea. It was called the Woodland Bird Sanctuary, but it was renamed after her. Interesting things I learned from Billy were their family still gets residuals from some of the writing she did, literally to this day. She wrote for Nature magazine, but tracing back to the period where she was very depressed, she wrote, and we think about mental health. I believe it's Mental Health Month now, although it probably should be every month. The Boston Globe had a column where women used pseudonyms to write about what was going on in their lives, and she wrote about grief and loss of a child, which is a huge thing, under the name Of Thee I Sing. And so it was this way that all these women got to know each other and what they were really struggling with. Years later, when she hears chainsaws cutting trees down in this lot next to her, she writes a letter to all these people who have conversed for decades, saying, I need to raise money to save this piece of land. This is the land that these birds I've been writing about use for their migratory rest here. And she saves that piece of land. So if you're listening, person who didn't think she was significant, I think she was significant, you know?
But that brings up another issue. During the process of designing this, someone said, what about ordinary people? What about ordinary women? And I think part of what the monument says is that nobody's ordinary, that this is some level of achievement and contribution is in all our lives. And we want to encourage that and celebrate that. So they're not, super famous women. They're women of Lexington. They did something bold. And that's what we're celebrating.
And one of the things I love in Meredith's design, and Meredith selected some people and then our team suggested some people and we worked together, was what makes someone either from Lexington or a woman who's worthy of recognition.
Yeah.
There's so much space. So not every woman in there who's an adult woman has children. Caroline Wellington never had children. She never married. Then we have girls in there. 2 days ago, I told Meredith, a little girl came by with her dad and 2 siblings. And she rides her tricycle around and around. Then she kind of climbs on the monument and shakes it and says, Dad, it's not shaky. And I'm thinking, this is fascinating. She sees this, as we worried a little bit, as the town worried, as like a play structure. And then right when they're leaving, but it's been structurally engineered very well, so don't worry. But right when she's leaving, she's walking away and she turns around and she goes, Dad, that little girl's famous. I was like, oh, she did. She saw all the girls. She saw the adult women, and she was able to, I think, draw, hopefully, this impression that girls are important. I think one point we like to make is fewer than 7% of monuments in America include historic women. Meredith happens to have sculpted many of them.
I've added a few.
And in this work, I think what Meredith has done is there's not just one black woman. There are more than 5. There are 5 individual black women named. Not just one woman who was free and enslaved, but 3 black women at the time of the battle or the years leading up to it. And then also black women in the 1800s and 1900s for us to think about.
And recently, Sylvia Farrell Jones.
Exactly, and to think about, we're the birthplace of American liberty. What is the pursuit of liberty meant for women and girls from the 1700s? What does it mean now? What does it mean if you're white? What does it mean if you're a woman of color? Yeah. Other questions? That was a really long answer to your question.
Wow, where do you get the necklace?
Oh, that's a good question. Saturday, Discovery Day, Wales copy starting tomorrow. And we're working on other more modern ways. But if you find one of us, we will help you. Kamala is committed to delivering in person to anybody.
I thought it was an ad there.
Yes, there's definitely an ad.
We're
And there will be more.
nonprofit.
There will be more designs. There'll be an owl and
Let's start.
the sunflower and the tulip will be available, and I don't even remember the rabbit.
The
I think,
rabbit, yeah.
and the squirrel. Yes. Okay.
Other questions? Valerie?
Hi. So I've heard you talk about this before, but I had gotten so many questions, so I thought I would ask it so that other people can get the benefit of your answer. So with this bronze monument, what is the aging and weathering going to look like over time in terms of the color and the appearance over time?
Well, the color is chemically created. It's a patina. It will last decades. The underlying bronze will darken, but the patina should keep it the same basic brown. What it needs is an annual washing and waxing. And when the Boston Women's Memorial was first unveiled, the city was not doing that. So I went out with my brother's family, my sister's family, and the Boston Women's Commissioner and her assistant, because the Women's Commission was 2 people, and we shampooed the ladies for a few years. And it was fun, and they turned on the water for us. So very mild dish detergent, not wearing any sharp jewelry, and you just kind of wash all the dust and acid rain and whatever anybody stuck to it off it. And then a light coat of floor wax, it's like taking care of a car, basically. That's what, the wax is enough of a barrier over the course of a year to keep that patina safe.
You heard it here. The artist's intent is not to turn green.
No, no.
The select board really
no,
wanted,
no,
and now Lex Media has it forever, Meredith.
Okay.
Hi, I've never asked you this before. I know Meredith from the project very well. How did you decide to make all of the women and all of the smoke and everything in motion, and instead of just presenting everybody foursquare, right?
The man asking this very intelligent question is my husband, Michael Bergmann, who is also the project manager. He's a filmmaker and writer and director, and he kept track of all the different contractors and designers and people, especially around getting everything to arrive on the site when it was supposed to and fit together. So, yes, motion. Oh. Well, stasis in sculpture is it's very awe-inspiring, but it kind of stops you in your tracks. So even ancient Egyptian figures have 1 foot forward like that, even though they're very symmetrical, they're very simple. And the minute you get the ancient Greeks involved in sculpture, everybody's doing this, and then you get to Renaissance art and Baroque art, more and more and more motion. It gets pretty hysterical with marble carvings of fluttering draperies. Bernini, Apollo and Daphne. Daphne's turning into a tree, and he's got the leaves. These are tours de force, and I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to show history as something that is in motion. It's not fixed, and how we look at history changes every decade. I mean, more often now, I suppose, as our culture kind of widens with the internet. Opinions are changing, attitudes are changing, and who is respected and who is denigrated changes. So history is in motion, and we are in motion. We are here now, but in 10 years, everything will be different. And I wanted to kind of suggest that there is what I call the sweep of history.
Question, yes. It helps when you use a microphone because Lex Media will pick it up better.
I wanted to ask about the foundry. Have you used the foundry before? Have they ever done anything? I mean, it's extraordinary what they did, and how long did it take them from the time the truck brought it there?
Okay. I had not used this foundry before, but I have used many foundries, and I knew what I was looking at the first time I visited. It was clean, it was well organized, the employees were happy. I've been in foundries where they were miserably treated, and the work kind of showed that. It just seemed like a really good place, really well run, very serious. And yes, they had done many large sculptures before. They've been around for at least 15 years, I think. Their presence in Amesbury is more recent, but they've had the foundry running. And the work was there for 7 months. And probably 20 people, maybe 15 people, worked on it. It's an ancient process, and they use modern winches, and they use silicon in the bronze, and all kinds of rubber molds, which the ancient Greeks and Romans didn't have, but it's essentially the same idea, bronze casting.
Suzanne.
How did you learn to do all this? I'm just curious what the career path of somebody who is able to accomplish something like this.
Oh. Well, I went to art school after a couple of years of college, thinking that I wanted to tell stories and do work that was very thematic and narrative. I thought I'd become an illustrator or graphic designer, and I quickly discovered that those specific careers were just not for me. And I kind of wandered around my art school trying everything. I went to Cooper Union, and I tried painting and video, and calligraphy was wonderful, but none of it clicked. And I went to my advisor in despair, and she said, oh, if I were you, I'd try the bronze foundry. And I was afraid of tools, afraid of machines, afraid of, long processes. I didn't have much patience. I tried wood carving and gave it up. But in the bronze foundry, we could model with wax. with a little Bunsen burner to heat a tool and just make things that required no structural knowledge because the wax holds together. And then they would help us, the shop assistants would help us invest them and melt them out and cast the bronze and clean them off. And then I'd be holding a little object that would last thousands of years. And that just blew me away. There was something about the romance of that got to me. And then I began to learn all the difficult processes and skills and patience necessary to be a sculptor. I traveled to Europe. I ended up living near Carrara and studying marble carving, which really requires patience, and bronze casting for almost a year. And then came back and studied anatomy, which I'm still studying at the Art Students League in New York then, and other places since. So I just keep studying. But I've been doing this for about 45 years.
I have a question for you. We've talked about it elsewhere a little bit, but there was an article in the paper, actually I take it back, it was the Made in Massachusetts segment about this project, and when it was first posted online it just said Meredith Bergmann sculptor, but then like 2 days later it was revised to say female sculptor. And I was interested in that because we've talked about there aren't, well let me just not say anything. How does it strike you? Would you prefer that we talk about you as a sculptor or as a female sculptor? What are your thoughts?
I think sculptor is fine. Once they have a photo, they'll know. You know.
It was very interesting. We were open to the best sculptor we could find, period, which I think we got.
Thank you, Jessie. Any other questions?
I will try not to ask you questions all night. But one of the things that I really love about the monument is all of the stories, and both the serious stories and the whimsical aspects that are in the monument as well. But also all of the symbols. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about like the symbols that came from the community and from your own imagination in terms of culture and activity and, you know, all of those things that those symbols represent in the monument.
I can try.
All right.
Yeah, LexSeeHer did a lot of outreach to different ethnic and cultural groups in town to suggest animals or plants or something else that could be incorporated because there was no longer room for additional women. And the peacock, who is actually a peahen, of course, because all the animals in this are female, and she has a chick with her following behind, is an animal that is celebratory in Indian culture and in Chinese culture, I believe, too. And the apples are a great local fruit. One of them does have a worm in it, which my son sculpted. There is a snail in one corner that represents the slow progress of women's rights. There's a ladybug hidden away. I believe it's the state insect of Massachusetts, but it's known for its maternal qualities, you know, fly away home.
Can I tell the Ruth Morey story?
Yes, please.
Meredith also has symbols of different professions. So some of the women are holding a symbol, like Sylvia Farrell
This
Jones is holding
traditional
Fields of
statuary
Justice.
that you hold an object that tells the world who you were. Yeah.
So Ruth Morey is on one side. In 1956, Ruth was the first woman elected to the select board, then called selectman. On the other side is Marge Batten, 1986, first woman elected town moderator. So when Meredith one day said, you know, what is Ruth Morey holding? And they both have a microphone, but what's different? And so the research team did work on Ruth Morey, and she was on the select board, kind of like now, at a time of a lot of building projects. So I said, you know, I don't know for sure, but a symbol here is definitely the shovel at the groundbreaking. So 2 weeks ago, Ruth Morey's descendants mailed Ruth Morey's white tricon hat here. It went into the procession we had last week so that she was kind of with us in spirit. And Meredith put that hat in the monument, so she's right there, you can see it. Mm-hmm. But underneath they had clippings, and don't they have a clipping of Ruth Morey with a shovel outside Emery Park digging in a tree? It was perfect. So it really, most of them we had documentation for, but then the one we didn't, we did.
Yeah. Sylvia Farrell Jones was a puzzle because she was president and CEO of YW Boston and a great civic organizer and a lawyer. And I said, well, there really isn't any symbol for a lawyer except the scales of justice, but that's not something you carry around with you all day, the way you use a shovel to dig a hole or your aviator goggles if you're going flying. And we simply couldn't find any other way. We didn't want a briefcase, that doesn't really do it. More documents, no. So she is holding a little pair of scales.
Oh, and I will add that Eliza Fallon, who wrote, she was an abolitionist and a suffragist, as in Fallon Church, but she also wrote The Three Little Kittens. And Meredith and the whimsical side put a cat in there, and if you look closely, you'll see Eliza Fallon is holding one mitten, and the cat is holding the other mitten. And then and the cat is holding a little book. And on one side, it's a cookbook, and the cat has a little picture of a mouse on the book.
Yep.
So we want to just thank you all and really encourage you. Oh, hang on one sec. We want to encourage people to get involved because it's there is really, as I said, it's a beginning. This year's Spinning Tableau is August 31st. It's a Saturday. It's Labor Day weekend. If you are one of the many people like me who do not go away that weekend, come and be with us at the site. I forgot to mention there's a woman from the Concord's 250th who will come over and join us this year because, why can't we all be friends in all these wonderful towns? And then also come sew with us. As you can see here, we have people getting work done. Something is being done right here.
Yes.
What we did is, with the 250th coming up, it can be really fun to dress up. You don't have to make a whole perfectly historically accurate outfit, but making an apron or a petticoat can really actually be an enjoyable thing when it's a way to sit together and make friends with people who you may not know yet, but maybe they're future friends that you just met through the project. So look for those dates at LexSeeHer.com. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, go to LexSeeHer, and that's where we tend to put almost daily updates on what's going on. Meredith will have other times where she comes to visit and talk. We will get the descendant autobiography statements and, for example, Ruth Morey's grandchildren wrote memories of their grandmother. All of that will be coming onto the website as we recover from last week. So more people can do more research. And then we announced last week the Leslie and Colin Masson Research Fund is going to give us the financial ability to pursue some of the loose ends that we discovered while working on this. And we really could use helpers to do it as volunteers, but we may have some stipends. If you know someone in your world who is looking for a stipend to do meaningful work, I will give one example. Mary Elizabeth Miles Bibb was the first Black woman to graduate from the normal school after she fled America with her husband who had escaped from slavery. They published a newspaper called Voice of the Fugitive. Meredith put it in the works so we won't forget the title. But we're looking for people to go through the issues of that online, looking for articles that Mary wrote. We have found some, but it means sitting and going through and looking for them. So lots of work still to be done. Helen, thank you so much for having us here, and
thank you.
This library is a wonderful place
Thank
for
you.
all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. And certainly stay, and once I lift up the projector screen, you'll be able to see the films.
Yes, and I'm going to give a shout out. Chelsea Parrish, graduate of Lexington High School, designed these panels, so please do take a look. And if you would like to take information home, Betty right there has our book. It is $20. All the proceeds go to pay for the book and to support the Monument Project. And you can pay by credit card. And then the guide is $5 if you're more of a $5 person. That gives you a little bit of biographical information and also literally puts women on the map by showing a place where these women left their mark in our community. Thank you, Meredith. You're the best team.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you.